Good morning and welcome everyone to our first MYOB Advanced webinar. My name is Pranesh Ravindra. I'm the Practice Manager for MYOB Advanced. Today we'll be presenting the new features that got added to the latest MYOB Advanced 2021.1 version. And we'll also show you some demos, some few tips and tricks on the software as well. The presentation will be done by Stuart Hodge, our product expert, whom most of you are already familiar with. And I will now pass on the session to Stuart to demo the new features. Thank you.
Thanks, Pranesh. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. It's great to see such a good turnout. I'll shortly take you through a live demo of the new features within the MYOB Advanced 2021 release, but let's have a look at the agenda. Today, we'll review various screen changes that are introduced in the new version. This starts really with a recently viewed button, which gives you a list of your last viewed or used records. It's quite handy to actually go back and find something you're working on, so I think you'll like that. Then there were screen layout improvements with a new look with screen titles, so which makes each screen just a little bit clearer to see what record you're on. Also, there's some nice new side panels that pop out information on the CRM screens. Business accounts, sales opportunities have those as standard. So each of those areas has the new side panels, but keep in mind these side panels that you'll see can also be used across the rest of the system. Then we'll look at the improvements within the new workflow engine. That immediately makes things like the screen action menus, the ones that you'd normally be accustomed to dropping down, even easier to use by providing specific buttons to help you progress to the next step. So that really just means less mouse clicks to work transactions through step by step. So then there's the financial dashboards. So they're coming out of the box now. So they provide useful information, particularly around the finance area. So accounts receivable, payables, financial controller. Then we'll have a look at the company groups. That provides a new way of controlling the visibility of customers and suppliers within multi-company businesses. So it also has the extra benefit of showing the financial transactions both by company or across the group. So we'll have a look at that. And then with intercompany trading, this is a great new feature that now automates the cross-selling transactions between related companies. So both using purchase orders and sales orders, so where you need to process transactions that have stock using purchase orders and sales orders, and also just if you're processing intercompany charges from one entity to another one, you're producing an accounts receivable invoice. So having recharge type processes then automates the creation of the accounts payable bill on the other company's side. So on top of these new features, I thought it'd also be appropriate just to talk about some tips and tricks. So hopefully in this part, you can get some new ideas on the features that perhaps you're already using, but sometimes it's not quite obvious within the software. So this will cover some of the areas of business events, which involve setting up email alerts or SMS messaging. It will include generic inquiry tips. So generic inquiries are the basis of most of the screen lists. So some tricks around that. And then we'll look at the universal search feature and certainly some ways of being able to manage that that some people are not aware of. So let's switch over to the demo. First thing you notice is that it's a new log-on screen, which really just has some changes around selecting of the tenant, but you'll always just be normally logging into the live tenant, or if you need to go into test, then that can be cleared. But this makes it a bit easier, and most people should be going through the secure authentication now as a sign-on method. So I'd like to know if someone's not using that method to log in. It makes it much easier. You don't have to even worry about your username and password. So the first point I mentioned around the screen changes is the recently viewed button. And that's an easy way just to go back and have a look at what record you were working on recently. Perhaps you left off somewhere. So it lists up to 500 records down the middle of the screen here. So it's pretty easy just to find out where you might have been working and to pick up the same record. Now, there's other ways of being able to manage this. So I can also search. So if I was searching up here for ABC Studio, so maybe it's a number of different things that I was working on for that particular customer. So I can type in that particular name and see all the related records, so sales orders, quotes, and so on. So in there, I could be using order numbers, suppliers, stock descriptions. It's pulling out the data across the record header. So on the left-hand side, you can filter on record types. So if I was just looking for accounts receivable invoices, then that's an easy way to find those. And then on the right-hand side, I'll just go back to all, you'll see, I'll clear the customer, and I can see my favorites. So these might be transactions that I just parked, needing to do something with them. So for example, might be an accounts payable document that I need to go in and find the invoice for. It might be various transactions that I need to address. So that's really just something that you would tick and untick when you finish that particular transaction. Right, so now I'll just go into a particular order to show you screen titles. So just searching on that particular example, this is a sales order, and just an example of the previous version just had the word sales orders, and your eyes would have to go looking within the screen to find the customer name and the order number. Now they're just more prominently placed on the top here. So much easier to see on each top screen. And then the next area to consider is just the action buttons. So we've got the guided approach, not just with the action drop-down, but being able to look at a transaction like this and then flow all the way through, rather than clicking and selecting the next option. So perhaps remove hold. The most likely next step that I need to follow is shown as a button instead. So this is one of my little favorites. I can take this particular transaction. It needs to have its credit hold removed. But as I'm navigating through each status, it's now allowing me to then create the shipment. I don't have to go to the actions drop-down. So this is just guiding me through each step, producing the shipment. I then may make various changes, but I can confirm the shipment. And of course, there's other actions that might be done, but I can go all the way through using the action buttons being the most common things. So all the way to release the particular invoice. So I think they've done a great job at just improving the means of guiding a transaction from the start to the end point. Right, now let's take a look at side panels. Just go to the business accounts menu. So this is an area where it's just bringing up my CRM accounts. So these are customers and prospects, and I can see some suppliers here. Now, the new feature is being able to select a particular customer in this case, and then have the navigation pop out on the right-hand side. So this starts with the more conventional things. If I was drilling down into this customer, this is what I'd see. In fact, from this screen, it's a pop-out screen. I could maximize it to see everything like I normally would on a full screen. But in this case, I just want to be able to navigate through some basic information. So I can do that. I could drill down into it as normal, but the idea of the pop-out is that I can look at things like opportunities. And so it gives me now a very visual dashboard of what is actually on this particular prospect. So I can make a much better way of looking at the status of any particular record that perhaps I'm interested in looking at, and toggle between, in this case, different customers, seeing the same information but presented relevant to that particular customer. So there's the opportunities, sales orders. So it gives me that snapshot of what orders are to ship, what is late orders. And to the extent of being able to see here, there's an open order here. If I then need to act on this, if this needs to be shipped, then I can just click on the particular record. You can see it was meant to go out a long time ago, but that now brings up the record and back to these action buttons. I can just create the shipment, and that will get picked, packed, and hopefully dispatched. So just as an example of being able to do something like that, act on the information that's presented on here. The last one that's useful, there are some other options on here, but the last one that's useful is the accounts receivable information. So as you can see, the whole dashboard concept being applied to this side panel approach, just being able to slide it away or open it up when you need to. All right, so then we're moving on now to the new workflow engine. So what is the workflow engine? Let's have a look at accounts receivable. I'll just bring up a new invoice. So as far as this invoice, I haven't created it yet, but we'll start with balanced and we take it through the different processes, the different steps, as we saw before, just on the actions. Those actions are controllable now through a new workflow engine, and it's a much nicer way of visually seeing. And this is not the sort of thing I'd expect everyone to go in and maintain. It is something that you can visually see and perhaps get your head around what are the different steps that at the balance state, but it certainly helps us being able to configure and change that workflow to customize it to the way you want. So I think there's a lot of improvement around just what we can now achieve through customizing some of these actions and certainly putting buttons into the right screens. An example of that might be just bringing up a stock item here. I'll bring up a finished item that happens to be a kit. So this stock item is an active item, but it's a kit as seen down here. So it shows a kit assembly. Now, if I looked at another item next to it, it's not a kit and the button doesn't appear. So it's really looking at certain conditions, in this case, a simple one saying, if it's a kit, show the button. What do I want to see when I click a button? Well, I want to see a custom list that shows the production for that particular kit. So quite simple, but allows us to customize something. So that's really just trying to reflect on the fact that these this functionality, although it sometimes requires some knowledge in how to add the buttons, it's much easier to do that sort of thing now with the features with that new workflow engine. All right, the next topic is financial dashboard. So after the upgrade, you get a dashboards icon here. And I'll talk in a moment about whether or not you can see it. So initially it may not be visible to you if you don't have rights to it, but they're there out of the box. So accounts receivable clerk, accounts payable clerk, and controller are three dashboards that are given to you. And these are great from the point of view of the information that's contained in them. You might want to change them around, change what you see on the screen. Some things may not be applicable, or you may want to add to it. And it's probably that last part, that taking what is being created here and then adding your own requirements might be what you're after. So what you can do is just have a look at the design within here. In fact, I'll go to the controller. You can spend your own time having a look at these if they're relevant to your role. But the controller one is a useful one, being able to see accounts receivable on the left side and accounts payable on the right-hand side. So being able to see a lot of the graphical information. Yours will naturally show a little bit more than my demo system in how it appears. But with all the dashboards, the normal functionality exists around. These are scorecards and KPIs. One change here is one of the nice features within the different widgets, as they like to call them. changing it from a scorecard now to a meter. So having some different visual way of looking at that particular thing. So having a meter like that where you can put the acceptable levels in there so that it's coming out still with green, yellow and red, but you get a bit more of a snapshot of whether it's visually acceptable rather than just the red, green. So that's a new image type that's available. And as I said before, looking at the properties here, what I want you to be aware of is if you do customize dashboards, as in you need to be a dashboard designer in your role, you can make sure that you've got access, or that individuals have got access, by making sure that you've got a granted setting here. So the controller will have a role that is the financial supervisor, so down here. Now you can always add that, and you'd probably be best just to either add people as the financial supervisor as relevant, or just say, well, the AR clerk can go to the AR clerk icon here, but perhaps more so that you would have your own roles, is what I'm trying to say. So rather than something like AR or AP clerk, if that's not used. Okay, so that's financial dashboards. The next point is company groups. So within the setup, we have companies that are available. I'll just perhaps go straight to the outcome here. When we set up companies, we can allocate them to one or more groups. So when I'm looking at a customer, so I'll just bring up customer summary. The end result of this is perhaps the important thing. So at the top of the list, I can now see in my example here a group structure where I can see company and branch, but I can also have multiple groups in there so that I can select at the top level of the group and determine which company needs to be aggregated within that group. So I can now see a new customer has been added because it's at group level, and so that can be quite useful way of being able to look at customer summary in the same way we can look at account summary for general ledger, so being able to review it from a trial balance perspective. Perhaps I'll just pick this group here, so being able to see the multiple branches within that particular group, all within the same summary. So it's a good way to filter transactions, but it's also a way of dealing with the visibility of transactions from one company to the other. So what I mean by that is being able to select a customer. So I'll just bring up you notice I use the universal search a fair bit to find things. So under financial, there should be a restrict visibility. There it is there. So this is a new field that's now available. So I can say this customer, I want to be part of the whole group, or I want it to be just within a particular company. So I can control whether or not, if this customer doesn't interact with each company within the group, then I can just make sure that the visibility of it is only managed within the companies that it's meant to be. So previously that visibility wasn't possible. All right, so now we're up to intercompany trading. So this is one of my favorite features here, because it's always been possible to have intercompany transactions through loan accounts at the general ledger level, but this now allows us to have a purchase order for a related entity to be processed, so that in effect we've got the purchase order and sales order automatically generating from each other. So I'll open up a purchase order here just to give you an example. Here's one I've created earlier. So the difference here is, once I've specified that we've got intercompany at a company level, so the related companies then appear as suppliers and customers. So in this example that I'm showing you, MicroChannel has a related entity that's now having a purchase order placed to it. And so I can immediately under the Actions menu create the sales order for that particular related entity. Now I can do it manually, but even better than that is it can just be an automated event behind the scenes that allows that to happen. So once I create the sales order, that would then appear in the sales order list. So that particular transaction is just automatically generated. So it handles the purchase order, sales order side, and also the accounts receivable, accounts payable. So I know that often is also an important thing to be able to see. So there's my sales order that finally came up there. May as well just open it and you'll see that all the items are generated there, and the pricing would obviously then be relevant to the particular the purchase requirement. So for the same sort of thing, but at an accounts receivable level, we can look at accounts receivable invoice. I'll just go straight to it again. So as I said earlier, this is the point that we would be doing an intercompany charge. So here's an example with a management fee. So in this case, it's going the other way around. So the customer's MicroChannel. So this is branch 2 on charging. And so it's the same thing that I can then generate the accounts payable document on the other side. So now these functions, as I said before, I'll generate this, but they're also available within these screens here. So generate accounts payable, intercompany documents. So if I just bring up that bill, oh, there it is there. Sorry, that was very quick and I missed it. That's where the recent helps by being able to go back to previous records. All right, so that handles the intercompany trading. So certainly one that's of great interest there. So that sort of ends the part around the new features. Now for some tips and tricks. So and I'll find that business events is particularly useful. So some people refer to it as alerts within the system. So alert emails can be useful to bring information known actually just by the system, but bring it to user attention. So some examples of that would be things like account costs, so actual costs exceeding budget in a general ledger, or maybe it's a project cost line exceeds budget. So making a finance person aware of it through one of these business events. When a sales order is entered for a customer exceeding their limit, so how does the accounts person then know that they need to release that order or check the credit terms? So I'll give you a demonstration of how that works. I'll just bring up a sales order here for, I don't know why I put the zeros in there, but let's bring up that sales order. So from any sales order, we can then review what conditions we want within the alert. So we go to Tools and Business Events. So I often refer to them as alerts, but the system is creating an event. So it's a business event that triggers an email or an SMS message. So I'm just going to create a simple example here around this credit terms. So just put credit limit, credit hold. So that creates the basis for alert on credit hold. And then I can go straight down here. So because I created it from a sales order, it knows which screen it's coming from. And although this is a little technical, it's really just saying we have a new field from the document table. And that field is the status. So, and it needs to be equal to credit hold. So hopefully that's straightforward enough, but just saying if the status field is equal to a credit hold, then create an alert. So now what does that alert do? Well, we have what's referred to as subscribers. Technically, I can create a new subscriber here. It's actually just a notification email format. So I have created one earlier, and I'm going to use the email notification. There are other options here to put a mobile push or SMS through to a mobile, or even import data based on a trigger through an alert. But the typical one is the email notification, and should have one here for reviewing sales orders on credit hold. So let's take a look at that. I can save that, and then I'll just park that here whilst we go back to that sales order. This one happens to be on hold at the moment. So this is a good example where I can see already that this customer's over their credit limit, but it's when I remove it from hold that the trigger will occur. So that's now put it onto credit hold. That business event is triggering and is creating a number of things. And if I just go back to that business event, one of the things that it does do is, let's go into the format of this. It creates an activity, and it has various formatted information and a link to click on that takes the user to the record as well to have a look at it. Now that's all accessible from within the sales order itself. If I just refresh this sales order, I now get an activities one over here. So it's just popped up there. And normally it takes a couple of seconds for the alert to run, but you'll see I've created this so that it just says review order on credit hold. This is actually an email. I could go to emails and say, well, this is the email that I've received, but this is the same thing. And it sits against the activity in this case. So that screen that I had before, I was just putting the appropriate summary information in here around the sales order itself. So the user can actually look at the file attachment because I've said attach the file. So that brings up the document itself. So they can see that if they need to, or just perhaps the intention would be that they would go to, sorry, I've missed the screen, that they would just from their email click on the link and it will take them directly into the record. And so that's an easy workflow to the objective of all of this is that the example being on credit hold needs to alert someone. Maybe they're not on the system, maybe they're not looking at their dashboard that will show them the things that they need to release off hold. But it's just to try and say that the system can push out that type of information, direct them to the record. So this has now taken that user to the record and they can remove it off credit hold. So just trying to put workflows in place like that around business events certainly helps improve well, things needing to be done in a timely way. So giving the system a voice to send information to users as might be appropriate. So it might be that the margins are not correct on the particular order being put in, or as I said, things like actual costs are exceeding budget, that type of thing. You don't know unless you go into the system. All right, so I think the next topic is the generic inquiry tips. So I'll have a look at accounts payable, and we'll go to just the standard AP bill list. So this one will look a little bit different just because it's got some things that I'd like to make you aware of if you're not aware. Having color coded sometimes just makes it easier to visually see something that's overdue. So this color coding can be put in so that it's a condition to say if it's overdue, show it in red, and simple things like that. The colors can be applied in different ways, either at line level or making figures more prominent or a column more prominent. So that's one aspect around it, just being able to see things clearly on the screen. Now, first tip here of what we see here is perhaps appropriate. It's the active filter. So these are different filters that you can create. You can create them yourself. So what I want to show you is just how to create something that becomes your default filter and just gives you some power of what you might go to as your first starting point when you go to something like this screen. So I'm going to my bills screen, but I actually want to create a new filter, and I'm going to call this, or I'm going to use this as created by. I should just type it in here and I'll show you it's much easier rather than scrolling down the list, and equals to me. So this is a particular code here. You can see it does drop down the list of users, but at me means that no matter who's using this, it will show the records that are created by me. Simple once someone tells you about it. So my bills, and I can make it my default. And I'll just point out, I've got the ability to share this across other users as well. You may not have that, but you can make it your default. And the purpose of that is to say, create a filter like this so that you're seeing the information that you want to see. Maybe it's not just the at me, but you can filter things so that this is your starting point. You still have active or unreleased or other things that you might need to see there that are already there, but create your own filters is the suggestion. All right, so when we're looking at this, I'm seeing a few from, I'll just go back to active actually, just to get the right records. So I see Origin Energy here. That happens to be one that I want to, a supplier that I want to look at. So now I can filter based on the column, and I can do that by clicking on the supplier name and typing in the name. Well, one little trick is the Shift F key. When I select a field on the list, it automatically creates that for me without me having to type in the name into the supplier name. So it's a much easier way to filter on anything that you've got in here, but that typical example there is supplier name. So once I've got that on the screen, I'm able to focus on, in this case, Origin Energy. So I can see here I've got some information that I actually want to make sure I've got all the invoices attached to this particular one. I want to reconcile to the supplier statement, so I can do that by filtering and looking at the records that I've got here. So this one happens to be typical where I don't have a file attached. Maybe I should go in here. I happen to have a file. So document storage is a really important thing. We like to have the paperless office. So I can just drag and drop that onto the screen, anywhere on the screen, and it then creates it as a file attachment. So that just now means that I can refresh this screen. I should have pressed the refresh button rather than the cancel button. I'll just refilter. So I can now say, oh, I've got all the documents attached. That's great. I can now reconcile it to the statement. They agree. This one happens to not be balanced. Now I'll need to go into it. Now, rather than going into each of the screens as I did before, I've now got these pop-out panels. So this certainly is now a nice way of being able to do this. I should have and could have dragged the document straight to the invoice from here. So I can see the the documents attached. I can make notes on here as well. It's probably not what I'd need to keep as a note, but I can see that these things are now able to be interacted with. So by moving up and down, and I'll save it in a moment, so being able to save and moving up and down is the purpose of being able to navigate across more than one record. And I can see, well, this one's balanced, so I actually need to release that. So without opening up the screen, I can do a lot of what I need to do from here, knowing that I can just refresh the screen here and see that they're all open. Now that's not all. There's other things that I might want to do. So within here, I've got a drill down. So sometimes drill down is appropriate in various places, just like opening up the invoice here, maybe opening up the supplier itself from here. And that's fine. This is what we've always done. It can pop up a window and show the supplier details across the multiple companies, but I'll just bring that up so that we can see some transactions that are in here. But even better than that now is just being able to push this through so that we've got the data on the side. So what I want to do here is just show you, we can now go into our customization. So, and this is relevant to the people that can customize the generic inquiries. It's not everyone. And so some of this is just showing the capability of what can be done, not that everyone does it. But I can go to a navigation page. So this area is really just saying, what do I want to see on the screen? How do I want to see it? And where do I want to navigate to when I'm looking at something like approved bills for pay? I'm actually now going to change it. Rather than a pop-up window, I'm going to put this onto the side panel. So just by changing that over, the screen that I had before, just going back into. So being able to now see on the side here and approved bills for payment. So that may be just a useful way of looking at that Origin Energy example. So filtering on that again, just being able to say, okay, I can see all of this. I didn't even need to filter from it. I can bring them all together, approve them. And this is assuming that we're just doing a simple approval here rather than an approval workflow on each one. And that type of approach allows me just to get my job done a little bit easier. Have the right pop-out approach here, whether or not I need to do other things on this often determines whether or not I need other pop-outs or whether I need other drill downs from the listings themselves. So perhaps is just a good statement to say, enhance what you've got on there to make it a lot easier. All right, the next topic is just the universal search, and I've been using this a fair bit just through this demo anyway. So being able to put in just a reference number is perhaps what I would normally do, but it's important to know that you can do other things like if I'm looking for a sales order for ABC company, then I can type that in, and normally I'm pressing enter. It's important to know pressing enter takes me from the menu items over to the transactions and profiles. So typing SO for the sales order or the different transaction types and then the part of the company name just is the best way of being able to find what you're looking for. Rather than just ABC, I can put sales order in. It's similar to looking for a quote, so that's got the quote prefix, and it might be active staff as the customer name, so active staffing service, and it's a quote. So being able to find things with multiple words that are in here. So if it's a shipment and it's for ABC, then I might type something like that. Then if I knew the shipment number, maybe I would type that in as well, but being able to just filter through universal search. The other aspect is being able to put in even just an item. Maybe it's that code that I had written down, but just being able to realize it's not important to get the description exactly right. In this case, I've got the year after the name, so it will find. So I treat the universal search really as the Google search across the system. Okay, so really just the last tip that I would have for you is always remember that you've got the tools to educate yourself. So under tools, we've got Education Center. So if we click on that, what you should realize perhaps is MYOB put continuous effort into updating these not only release documents, so this is where your release documents for the 2021.1 release and previous releases are stored. There is the Advanced Academy, which has all the learning videos, videos themselves. So I would suggest being familiar from time to time with what's on here. It's certainly a good way of just getting some extra knowledge around what's available within the system. So automatic join suggestion, there's a short video of 1 minute 47 that takes you through how to do joins. So, and there's something on business events, there we go. So always remember that there's help around. Obviously there's the in-product help as well through the user guides, but video help is sometimes an easier way of being able to get some further ideas. So to that extent, that's the end of the tips and tricks, and I hope you enjoyed the new version release, certainly the key features that I presented today, and there's plenty of others, but they're the ones that I think are most relevant across the board. So hopefully that's given you some good ideas.